Yeah, I mean, it's surely possible. I mean, I likened it to another situation when a new general manager came and there was a lot of uncertainty around the manager and the team wasn't in great shape and everybody thought that he was the seat warmer. Well, that guy was Charlie Manuel under Pat Gillick. And it all worked out pretty nicely for Charlie and for Pat as they paraded down Broad Street. So different situation, obviously. You know, that team had a younger Jimmy Rollins, a younger Ryan Howard, a younger Chase Utley, Cole Hamels coming up. So, yeah, there was a lot that went into it. But, yeah, I wouldn't necessarily, discard Pete as just kind of a placeholder. He's a guy that's been in the game for a long time. He's respected. A lot of people thought that he should have had this opportunity a long time ago, with different opportunities. He's interviewed with a lot of people, just for whatever reason was never the guy. He's very popular among the players. I mean, he's a lot like Charlie in that, he tries to keep things light and he tries to keep the players loose. That's good for a young team because you don't want kids that are trying to kind of establish themselves in the big league to play it tight and to go into every game thinking, we got to win this or we're going to get our butts chewed out. I think that Pete has the right demeanor for a young team. But at the end of the day, in any sport, it is all about wins and losses. So even though this team this season you could chalk off as, okay, well, they're expected to lose 95 games. If they have a similar season next season, few managers, regardless of where they at, are going to survive something like that. So I think this season, though, he'll get a quote-unquote pass, with the win-loss record.
Yeah, as you mentioned, wins and losses usually the parameter for success. What does he view as success for this team?
I mean, he wants to win. He'll tell you that, and that's the Q&A that I posted last week. That he said that's still the goal. You want to win games, but that said, he also understands what he has in front of him, and it's a team that's very, pretty much green. You have a lot of young guys everywhere, and they're going to keep on coming up from the minor leagues all season long. I think for him, it's to see progress. It's to see guys like Cesar Hernandez and Freddie Galvis, two guys who had a chance for the first time to be everyday players, for them to take that next step. Same thing with Michael Franco, for him to kind of build off of the year that he had last year and keep doing what he was doing without kind of having that quote-unquote sophomore slump. Same thing with Aaron Nola. So, it's just to kind of make sure that all these guys move forward and the ones that have a lot of talent for them to, kind of realize that talent. Because, at some point, as he said, you lose that prospect kind of label and you got to go out there and show that you're a major league player. So it's just that, for everybody to kind of progress from whatever stage they are at their respective careers.
Ryan Lawrence with the Phillies in Clearwater, PhillyVoice.com. He took over for Sandberg last year. He's got Boa on his staff still now. When you look at Pete, what is something that allowed this team to, I don't want to say succeed's not a great word, but they had more success under Pete than they did Ryan. What are the differences between Pete and Ryan that really stood out?
It's pretty obvious from a personality standpoint. I mean, and this isn't anything against Sandberg, but different people are just built different ways. I mean, Sandberg may have a little bit more of a Boa kind of demeanor in him, and we all know that Boa and Charlie are very much kind of opposite type managers. And I think that Boa has probably cooled off a little bit in his older age. But yeah, I mean, you have guys that are kind of tightly wound and intense, and you have guys that are more laid back. So, I would put Sandberg in the latter category, that he was more tightly wound and more of an intense guy and, maybe just not known for his communication skills as guys like Charlie and Pete are, because it's kind of Charlie and Pete are just very personable guys that, again, are going to keep the mood light and keep everybody kind of, in more, loose moods. So, again, because they think that kind of fosters a better climate for them to succeed. So I would say that Rhino, really nice guy, obviously a terrific baseball mind. I mean, he's a Hall of Famer, but, maybe that he just wasn't the right guy for the situation, with younger guys. And with the transitioning, let's face it, the few years that he was here for, the 2.5 years or however you do the math, a year and a half, the 3 years, I guess you could say, from the end of the one season to the full season to the first few months of last season, they weren't very good years. It was kind of a disaster anybody probably was going to walk into. I mean, you had guys like Cliffley and Papelbon and didn't want to be here. And you had some players older players that just weren't competing anymore, that weren't able to compete anymore at a high level, still in the lineup, and you can't really get them out of the lineup because you have a general manager and other people that say these guys got to play. So it wasn't a great situation for Rhino, but yeah, there's definitely Pete's a different guy than Rhino, without a doubt.
Yeah, and, you've been around this team through the good times and now through the not-so-good times the last couple of years. And going down to spring training, Ryan, and not seeing Rollins and Utley and Hamels, and what – is there a completely different feel around this organization? Does it legitimately feel different being down there as opposed when Ruben was here and Charlie was here, and it seemed like it was kind of that old boys network for a good stretch here, and for good reason. I mean, they had a lot of success.
Still here, man.
Well,
Charlie's still here. Charlie's here. Bo is here. Dallas Green's here. So, I mean, in some respects, Pat Gillick's still here. So in some respects, this is it's a very family organization, and they're always going to have kind of their quote-unquote own people around. And Wade's still here. So, I mean, they've got – it's like, anytime you come anywhere into a Philly situation, you're going to see people from the past. But, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, obviously, Pat Gillick, Dallas Green, Charlie Emanuel, Larry Boa, we're all part of World Series teams. So there has been some success there. But to answer your question, yeah, there is a different feel. You have a very young general manager in charge, and he is, without a doubt, in charge. He's calling shots. And his boss is also new. He wasn't here a year ago, and Andy McPhail. So, yeah, both Andy McPhail and Matt Klentak, they're running the show now. And then, yeah, these other guys are kind of in the background, your guys like Gillick and some of the other people I mentioned. So, yeah, it's a different feel. And part of that is just the clubhouse, the makeup of the clubhouse. There's just so many kids in there. And I can say kids. I'm 39. I mean, this is the second year that I'm older than everybody on the team. But, yeah, in years past, that hasn't been possible because they've had guys like A.J. Burnett and, a lot of older players just kind of still lingering around. But now you look and there's J.P. Crawford, there's Andrew Knapp, there's Jimmy Cordero. Everywhere you look, there's young players, and not just, not just guys that are in their 20s, but guys that are in their early 20s, guys that are, have never been in the big league game yet. So that's exciting. There's just a lot of young prospects with talent. They're here in Clearwater. They're not going to be in Philadelphia in April for sure, a lot of them, but they're going to get there eventually, and that'll be fun. That'll be the most exciting thing about this season, if I were a fan, is to kind of just follow the progress of all these guys at different levels, whether they're arriving in Philadelphia or whether they're still down in Reading or Clearwater or Lehigh Valley. So,
yeah,
the organization's moving forward, and there is a different feel for sure.
And that's a big change. You talk about, we've had these discussions over the years about, hey, there's no young guys up here. They don't give them a shot. And just to even see, like Nola wasn't in camp last year, and a lot of people were scratching their head about that, almost like a courtesy to let some of these guys get the exposure.
You still there, Mike?
Yeah, you got me.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's I don't know. I don't think the previous administration failed those prospects. I mean, I think that everybody kind of arrives at their own time. I mean, again, they're not going to put J.P. Crawford in that lineup on April 1st or April 4th in Cincinnati. That'd be foolish.
No.
He just turned 21, and I mean, basically Nola. He did pretty well when he got up there, so I don't necessarily think they failed him. Same thing with Ken Giles, who everybody was clamoring for. And wasn't going to start the season with the team, that year, 2 years ago. So I think they're handling all these guys fine. I mean, I think the difference now is there's just that many more. There's just that many more prospects here. You don't have just that one guy, Nola, or that one guy, Giles. Now you have Crawford, Williams, Knapp. You've got a lot of guys, and on and on and on. So they just replenish the farm system, and part of that is due credit to the former administration. I mean, Pat Gillick and Ruben Amaro Jr. made a lot of these moves. So, just like, when the Phillies won in 2008, Ed Wade probably did. I mean, people did mention him. You should get some credit for that because, he had those guys like Utley and Madsen and Howard, and he didn't trade those guys. When maybe, some people could have argued that he could to get the team closer, at some point when he was in charge. So whatever. I mean, obviously, Ruben Amaro Jr. didn't make all great moves, and I think we've all hashed that and rehashed that over and over. But yeah, he's a part of the rebuild too, because he was here and he made some moves that are present here in the clubhouse.
No doubt. And his, it's much like you mentioned when the Phillies won the World Series in '08. Some people said Wade should be given some credit for not dealing many of the key pieces there. I think Amaro, if this team makes a successful run, some people will look back at that deal if those guys are a big part of it. But there is a lot of young players around. Ryan, who are some of the young players that you think will be a factor for opening day jobs?
I don't think opening day jobs. I mean, unless you're talking about like Vincent Velasquez, and that's not even opening day. That's the opening day roster, and I think he's a guy that would be in the rotation. And he's competing with a couple of lefties, Adam Morgan and Brett Oberholzer, who also came over in the Ken Giles trade with Velasquez. I would say that's kind of the race for the starter's job. And Velasquez has a big arm, and people should be kind of interested and excited to see him because he's a starting pitcher, and if he is a successful starting pitcher, that trade's a win because at the end of the day, relief pitchers give you 60 to 70 innings a year, and starters give you 200 innings a year. So if Vincent Velasquez turns into a pretty good starting pitcher, that's better than having a closer. Closers are pretty easily replaceable in the game nowadays. He's an interesting name that could be there when they break camp. But beyond that, I mean Aaron Altair, we already saw him, so he's not like quote unquote new. He should be on the roster on day one. Maybe Tyler Goodell. I haven't really, full squad workouts haven't even began yet, so I haven't really got a good look at him down here. But he's a Rule 5 kid. That maybe looks like Odubel Herrera can, he has to be on the roster day one as a Rule 5 guy. But maybe like Odubel Herrera, he'll make the most of this and won't just be a Rule 5 guy that sits on the bench like Michael Martinez, and instead is a Rule 5 guy that's a legit player that can be an everyday player. He would be a guy to keep an eye on. But a lot of these other guys, like Nick Williams and Andrew Knapp and Jorge Alfaro, the catcher who I wrote about just the other day, and obviously J.P. Crawford, you're not going to see these guys on day one. They're young. None of them have been at AAA yet. So, these are guys that, more fun to watch down in AA and AAA. And, some of them could get up before the end of the season and, maybe mid-season. But, I would say April, May, and June, you're going to see a lot of the players you already saw last year. And that's just the reality of a rebuilding situation. They're not going to rush any prospects up to try to win this year. I mean, it's not going to happen this year. You look at the pitching, they don't have the pitching to compete this year, and, there's just no sense in bringing a lot of those guys up when they're only 20, 21 years old and nowhere near Major League ready.
Yeah, and, the starting rotation will be very young with a couple of veterans in there, but the battle for that 4-5 spot should be fun. That bullpen's completely up for grabs. Are you trying out for that bullpen?
Yeah, I mean, probably not. Pitching was never my forte. I'm more of a middle infielder that no hit, but I got a glove. Really, I mean, you look at it, last year they had Jake Diekman and they had Ken Giles and they had Jonathan Papelbon. Like, it's a pretty good back end of the bullpen, and now none of those guys are here. And, the only guys that are back from last year that were in that bullpen were Luis Garcia, Dalier Hinojosa, Jean-Marc Gomez, guys that have kind of got an opportunity in the last couple of years, but, guys that you're not going to say, wow, these are the guys we're going to build this bullpen around. And that's nothing against those guys. Some of those guys have a lot of talent. They're just not the exciting names that they've had in the past. And then they have other guys in camp, like two guys I wrote about today, two local kids from South Jersey, Andrew Bailey and Greg Burke. One went to Gloucester Catholic, one went to Paul VI. And Andrew Bailey is obviously a former two-time All-Star who's had shoulder surgery. So they have a lot of, reclamation-type project guys.
Yeah.
I mean, the bullpen's not going to be their strength this year. But if they do some younger guys in the minor league that could jump into, those roles, again, not day one, but they have a kid, Jimmy Cordero, who I did mention earlier. I wrote about him this winter. He hit 104 miles per hour on a radar gun this winter in Dominican Republic. We got him in the Ben Revere trade. Again, another of these trades to replenish the farm system that, the previous administration made that could pay off in the end. So, the bullpen's going to be a work in progress all year, and it's not going to be their strong suit, probably, unless a lot of things just go right. But you know what? That's just what you get when you get a rebuilding team. It's just not a priority. You're not going to go spend $6 and $7 million on veterans to bring them in for a bullpen. It's just wasted money. That this is a lost year. It's a rebuilding year. You're not going to. It's just they'd be doing what people, told them not to do in previous years, and just, bring in veterans on major league deals when you're just flushing that money down the toilet, really, when the team's not going anywhere.
Yeah. Bailey's interesting. You mentioned, Rookie of the Year, a couple All-Star games. Does he look like he is a legitimate contender, or is he still kind of getting back from that injury, or does he look like a guy that they might have found a little diamond in the rough there?
Yeah, I mean, it's possible, but, we won't really know until the games start. I mean, right now everybody's kind of just throwing bullpens on the side, and, it's hard to tell a whole lot through there. Even Pete McCannon will tell you that. But it's just like, okay, well, let's see how hitters react to these guys and how that works, and, when they're in actual game situations. But, yeah, I mean, he's got talent. I think he's still only 31, so it's not like he's, got gray hair or anything like that. And on the back end of his career, I mean, he should have, a few good years left in him if he's healthy. But I will say the shoulder injuries are a lot more problematic than elbow injuries. The Tommy John surgery is just a very routine thing nowadays. So if guys have elbow, injuries, they get Tommy John surgery and they're back, and sometimes they're better.
Yeah.
Where shoulder injuries, it's not as searching for the word, but it's not as easy of a pass back. I mean, for example, a guy like Jonathan Pettibone, does anybody ever mention that name in however long? He had shoulder surgery and just never got back from it. So and he's just one guy. There's tons of guys in baseball so I would just temper my enthusiasm a little bit for Bailey in that shoulder surgeries are tough to come back from, and it's an 18 to 24 month recovery. He did finally get back on a major league mound last September. But yeah, hey, he's an easy guy to root for. He's a really nice guy. He's from the area, so that would be fun. And again, he does have the talent. He was an all-star his first 2 years in the big leagues with the A's, and then he actually won a World Series ring with Boston one of his a couple years there. So yeah, it'd be fun to watch him in a Philly uniform for sure.
Hey, Ryan Lawrence, PhillyVoice.com. That's where you can get all his Phillies coverage. He's down in Clearwater with the team. What is a guy like Ashe, who's young, he's already made a position change? I mean, are they looking at him as like a super utility kind of guy? Does he have a role on this team? He's a young guy that seems like he's just kind of in no man's land.
Yeah, I mean, but part of that is he has got an opportunity, and the numbers just haven't been there. I mean, and he doesn't play, particularly great defense. It's not like he's a shortstop or a catcher that's very good at one of those positions. He plays positions where you have to hit. It looks like that he can be a hitter, but it just hasn't, shown really. And he's had 2.5 years to do it. So, at some point you got to say, okay, well, we got to see other guys and what other guys can do. So I'm not saying they've just kind of discarded him and thrown him to the curb. But it's going to be tough to get him at bats, regular bats, when they want to look at some other guys. Like sure. I mentioned, the Tyler Goodell guy, younger guy with, some promise. They brought in Peter Borjos, who's an elite defender. I mean, so Borjos hasn't really hit a whole lot, but he plays extremely good defense. Defense that pushed Mike Trout out of center field one year. That's how good he plays defense. So, and again, actually, there's not one thing in his skill set that he does that well. You can't say, well, he's an elite defender. He just isn't. Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, this is just what happens. If you don't produce, you're going to have to move aside, and someone else is going to get the opportunity to get at bats. But, Pete is going to try him at first base to give him a little bit more versatility. Also have him, back at third base sometimes too, just to work him in and get him at bats somewhere. Because, he hasn't given up on him. He likes Cody. Cody's a very strong makeup guy. You're not going to find a guy that works out and works as hard. And this is a guy that followed Chase Utley around like a puppy dog for the last couple of years. So he's a worker, and he's going to put everything into it to try to, max out on his talent and to be that kind of player. But, yeah, just the reality is in the last 2.5 years, offensively, it hasn't shown up. So, he's going to have a good spring to get back on the radar.
Ryan Lawrence with the Phils. Last one for you, Ryan, is the players, I guess, are trickling. I guess Franco is yet to get there, but should be there later tonight. What, for you, is your top storyline at this camp?
Ooh, I think it's just the influx of youth. There's just so many young guys here, and so many guys with the Phillies' hope or bright futures. And compared to the last 3 springs, there was springs when obviously everybody was super excited because the team was great. But yeah, really the last 3 springs have been this team getting older, trying to fake everybody into thinking that they could still be contenders. I guess last year they weren't like that. Last year they were already in the rebuild. But yeah, I would just say the biggest storyline this spring is just that a lot of that young talent is here, and in that rebuild could be quicker than people think because, hey, if these guys, say they have 12 quote-unquote elite prospects, if 5 of them turn into good major leaguers, that's good. And then if you should be able to complement that with the payroll flexibility that they have. I mean, Ryan Howard and Carlos Ruiz come off the books after this year. They just have that Comcast deal kicking in, TV deal. They have money to spend. So I don't know if fans understand. It might not take that long before this team's a contender if some of these young players blossom. And that'll be the fun thing this spring to see if they can, get in that direction to start blossoming.
Well, for the first time in probably 3 or 4 years, Ryan, I think people are a little bit maybe not anticipating a great season, but more excited about what's to come, something you haven't been able to say the last couple of years around this team. So
Right, yeah. I wouldn't look at the win-loss record at all. That's not an indication of this franchise moving forward. It's just what you look at is, okay, what's J.P. Crawford doing down there? What is Andrew Knapp doing here? Is Corey Alfaro healthy and playing well? So, yeah, you have to look beyond the major to see, things going well.
All right, Ryan Lawrence, PhillyVoice.com is where you can find all of Ryan's stuff now. He's live in Clearwater. We'll see you down there soon.